and welcome to the Wonderwolle podcast, episode 3. I'm so glad you could join me this week, and welcome back if you're a returning viewer, and hello and welcome if you're a new viewer. My name is Andrea. I am AndeeJ on Ravelry. I have a blog which is www.healthykidshappymama.com, and I am Healthy Kids Happy Mama on Instagram. And there is also a Ravelry group for this podcast, and that is a Wonderwolle podcast on Ravelry. So, episode 3, I made it. I made it to episode 3, and this week I have no children at home. It's the afternoon. It's Monday, the 2nd of August. I recently started my littlest boy going to childcare on a Monday, and I've started working in the mornings on a Monday. So I have a little bit of time to myself, which is really nice on a Monday afternoon. This week's episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been working on in Wonderwolle projects. I have a new segment, which I will keep a surprise for now. And I'm going to just do some pondering about my thoughts around mistakes in knitting. As you might have guessed by the title, if I am not mistaken. And then a little bit of acquisition as well, not much this week, just a little. No outing this week, unfortunately. I did have one planned, but child illness in the house got the better of the planned outing this week, so that's okay, because it was going to be a challenge to do anyway, and I'll talk a bit more about that later as well. So let's get started. I've got some shout outs, which I promised in the Ravelry group that I would do. So hello to Amaris, who is Lollipop on Ravelry, Bettina from Denmark, Emmy Ma from New Hampshire, USA, Pam GR from the UK, and Have Knitting, who is Christy from the Blue Mountains in Australia. I also wanted to do some shout outs to a few other podcasters who have mentioned the Wonderwolle podcast in their podcasts in the last little while. So I watch quite a lot of podcasts when I'm knitting in the evenings. I don't really watch television, so podcasts are like TV, I guess, for me. I do watch some shows on streaming, but not really sitting down and watching proper TV. So Andre Sue Knits, hello, and thank you for mentioning my podcast in your Ravelry group. Fairy Little, they left a message on the first episode and shared it with their podcast listeners. So hello, I haven't watched your podcast for a while now, but I'll try and get to it this weekend. Thank you to Mina from the Knitting Expat podcast. She mentioned me in her last episode, and thank you. And the other one I've been enjoying lately is Tea House Knits, a lovely girl called Tina who presents Tea House Knits. And the reason I really like her podcast, aside from the fact that she's quite an accomplished knitter, is I enjoy her talking about the history of tea in China, and all of the different facts and interesting things that she mentions about tea. And so that's another one I've been watching. And the other one I promised I would mention is Sally from Pink Hair Girl podcast. Her son, I think his name is Caleb, was talking about squirrels in their segment on their podcast. And I said that I would mention the word squirrel in my podcast so that he could hear how somebody else says squirrel in another part of the world. We don't have any squirrels in Australia. I have seen them when I went to England about 10 years ago. They are very cute and destructive, I believe, in some parts of the world. But yeah, squirrel. there you go. So I might get going with the works in progress because I don't have any finished objects this week, and there's a good reason for that, and it's because of my works in progress having some elements of major failure. So I'm going to leave the most failed one till last and talk about the most successful one first. Work in progress, that is. I don't actually have many works in progress. I have done, well, I do. I have half a dozen works in progress, but that I've actually made any progress on this week. I haven't made much progress on much at all, to be honest, because I've spent the entire week trying to do this other one, which I've had so many problems with. But here is my the most successful project for the week. Most close to finished project for the week. This is a mitten knit in Fable, Drops Fable, and it's the Blue Lagoon colorway, and I bought this on loveKnitting.com, and this is the half of a gift for my sister-in-law whose birthday it is next Saturday, and I have started the second one. This is what the ball looks like, and that's how much I've done on the second one. It's got 30 rounds of 2x2 pearl ribbing, and you think to yourself in your head, oh, 30 rounds, that's not much, won't take me very long. It took a really long time, and I'm not really sure why. I think it's because I was so working on this other work in progress that I was a bit taken by. But once I got past the ribbing, it came together really, really nicely. This bit here took next to no time at all, and I haven't actually knit the thumb yet, as you can see there. This is, I've just made this up, it's not a pattern. I might write it up as a recipe. I like to think of it as socks for your hands. I'll put it on. There you go. So I think they've come together quite nicely, and I might write that up as a recipe. They're quite trans-seasonal, I guess, not too warm, but good if you go walking and that type of thing. So I've got to get my socks on and get my skates on, sorry, and knit the second glove before next Saturday morning. So that's for my sister-in-law. And then I was going to show you my sock yarn blanket this week because I haven't shown you that before, and I haven't actually done any work on it this week, but that's okay because I've not shown you this project before. And here, it's not very big. Here it is. There we go. So not many squares on it yet, but it's getting there. I have to say I find it a little bit frustrating joining the squares. And this one here actually somehow turned out too big, so I need to do that one again. I think I need to rip it back and do it again. But I love this yarn. It's I think it's Socks. No, it's not Socks That Rock. It's Vice Yarns Paradigm. So that's my sock yarn blanket, and I tend to knit on that one at bath time. Actually, that's the thing I pick up when the kids are in the bath to knit on. And so that's that one. That's that work in progress. And then the last work in progress I have is my this week, the one that I've been working on at least, is my Sunrays shawl by Mina from Mina86 from the Knitting Expat podcast. I'm enjoying knitting this. I'm going to start by saying that. I'm enjoying knitting this. But I have had no end of trouble. And it's got nothing to do with the pattern. Nothing at all. It's all user error. I got to the end of the garter stitch part and started the lace, and I think I ripped back maybe 6 times within the first 5 rows. I just kept miscounting, and I don't know why or how. And then I realized that what I was doing was I was missing yarn overs, and so I would do the pearl row and not count how many stitches were, and then start the next row, and then I'd be wondering why it was not counting. The counting wasn't working out. And so once I figured that out, I devised a system. I had to go through the pattern and write the number of stitches for each row on the pattern, and also, as you can see there, put in a lifeline at the garter stitch, because once you've ripped it back 3 or 4 times, you sort of think to yourself, hey, there's something going on here. So that was that. And then things were going really, really well. And I actually got up to row 29 of the lace pattern, and I was thinking to myself, yeah, I'm going to be finished this by the time it comes time to podcast. And I was excited to show it to you. And then disaster struck. I was knitting on it on the weekend. It was Sunday morning, and we'd been out quite late on Saturday night, and I picked it up, and I was actually on a purl row, but I started knitting in a knit row instead of in the purl row. And I was about 2/3 of the way through the row, and I was like, oh no, this should have been a purl row. So I started tinking back, and that would have been fine, except I dropped a stitch, and in my picking up of stitches, I dropped about 4 rows of lace in between the needles. So, you know, in here. So that was quite devastating, as you can imagine. I ripped it back to the garter stitch and have started again. And so that was on Sunday, so I've started the lace again, and you can see I'm not very far in. And that was because I had to stop and sort of take stock and say, right, I need to just take it slowly and count and check my stitches to make sure I'm not missing any yarn overs. And yeah, it's been a bit slow going on the lace, but that's okay, I think. I probably was rushing because I was excited to knit lace and to get going and to see what it turned out like. And I know it's going to be beautiful because I've seen quite a bit of the lace knit. And yeah, so I'm just going to take my time, and I hope that it will be finished by the next podcast, and you'll have a lovely shawl to see in the next podcast. I have also done a little bit on my Quaker Ridge shawlette, but it doesn't really, you can't tell what I've done because it's all the same pattern. And I haven't done anything on my socks, and I haven't done anything on my children's socks. I haven't done anything on my other blanket or my hat. I haven't done anything because I've spent the whole week knitting on my sunrays shawl. And I wanted to as well. It's the thing that I come home from work and I'm like, oh, I just want to pick it up and do a row of knit lace and a row of pearl, and then put it down and go and do something else for a while, and then come back after dinner. But after I made that catastrophic mistake, I had to put it down because it was devastating, as you can imagine. So that is all of the things that I've been working on this week, when it comes to knitting, at least. I guess I'll move on to acquisitions now, actually, because that's probably the best segue to my next section, the new section. I just got an order actually. One of the things that I bought just arrived on the doorstep when I got home. So that's freshly delivered to show you. And that was a Knit Picks order. I bought a whole bunch of stroll fingering to knit some socks with, actually, some plain socks, so that I can do some of the more patterned socks that are out there. And I have a particular pattern in mind for this emerald green and a particular pattern in mind for this grey, but this purple here is no plans. So I bought Sprinkle Heather and Everglade Heather and Dove Heather. So I bought 2 skeins of each of those. I also bought some gloss fingering. Here it is here. This is the velveteen colour. And I'm going to put this with another yarn, which I've just remembered. I had completely forgotten which yarn I planned to put this with. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, I think I might make a Cladonia or a Cameo shawl. And what I'm going to put it with is this Drops Baby Alpaca Silk in, it's colour 8108, but I think it's either called silver or light grey. And I bought 4 skeins of that from Love Knitting. So that will be, yeah, either a Cladonia shawl or a Cameo shawl, I think. And what else did I get? Oh, I got some Felici, because this is the Gummy Bear colorway. Because every single person who is podcasting right now has been talking about Felici, and I had to try it. Basically, you know, I can understand why Knit Picks brought it back, because if they need to make a few extra dollars in their budget at the end of the year, bringing back this is certainly going to build their bottom line a little, because every person in the world seems to want it. And I just love this brightness. It's so pretty. And I will be making some socks out of that one. So that's, oh, and then the other thing that I bought from Knit Picks to push it over $60 so that I could get free shipping is, sorry about that, I had run out of memory. So the other thing that I bought from Knit Picks, which just to increase my cost or the spend so that I could get free shipping, is this little, it's called an Anywhere Balm by Love and Lash, lavender and mint. So that's it there. I haven't actually opened it. It's a little bit tricky to open, or I'd open it right now. Oops. I can't open it. So I'll get my husband to do that later with his big strong arms. So yeah, that's my Knit Picks order. And then late last week, not long after I podcasted last actually, I also had an order arrive from Love Knitting. And that order contained my Drops Farbel in Blue Lagoon, which is the one I showed you earlier that I've knit that glove from. I bought that specifically with the purpose of knitting something for my sister-in-law, but I was going to knit her socks, and then I thought, not so sure about knitting socks for somebody else yet. I'm only just getting the sizing right for myself, so I'll just leave the sock knitting for somebody else maybe till next year. And you can't really go wrong with mittens and gloves. I don't think most women's hands are a similar size. So I bought that Drops Farbel and the Drops Baby Alpaca Silk, yeah. And the other thing I bought is this Drops lace, this one here, and I can't remember the name of the colour. I think it's purple. I think it's purple. I'm a bit nervous about knitting with lace weight yarn. I've been looking at different patterns that are out there for lace weight yarns. I'm nervous about knitting lace with the lace weight yarn. I like the look of the Rock Island shawl. Like, I love the Rock Island shawl, but it scares me. So that one might just sit for a while yet, I think. So that's all my acquisitions of yarn. But I did have another acquisition this week, which has been a bit of, that was a very impromptu purchase. I bought an Ashford traditional spinning wheel, which is quite surprising because I didn't think I wanted a wheel. I have done a little bit being the optimum word, on a drop spindle. This is my drop spindle. And I bought this off some Etsy seller, I can't even remember now, just to have a go at spinning because I liked the concept. I wanted to sort of understand more about how yarn was made. And while I did like spinning with the drop spindle, I also found it quite frustrating. And it could just be unique to this particular drop spindle. I think that the whirl on this drop spindle is not quite heavy enough, and it doesn't spin for very long. So you can't use it like you would use a drop spindle. You can't actually drop and spin with it. You have to park. You have to use the park and draft method. So so that was my drop spindle, and I had been thinking about how frustrating it was to spin with the drop spindle for me. And I didn't want to buy a new spinning wheel because I didn't know if I would enjoy it. I didn't know if it was something that I wanted to do forever. And so I didn't really think that secondhand spinning wheels would be that easy to come by. And then when I was at work last week, I had a 10-minute break and I went on Gumtree, which is our local equivalent to Craigslist, I guess, and online classifieds, and I typed in drop spindle, and I gave myself not drop spindle, I typed in spinning wheel. I gave myself a really wide radius of places where I'd be willing to drive to get it. And as it turned out, I didn't have to go very far at all. It was about 10 minutes away from my house. And so I got in touch with the lady and I said, I'd like to know a little bit more about your wheel. And she couldn't actually tell me very much. She bought it in the 80s and she had not used it. It was literally just being a decoration in her house. And they were getting ready to move to the coast for retirement. So she was getting rid of it. And I went and had a look at it after doing a little bit of research about spinning wheels, and particularly Ashford spinning wheels. I joined the Ashford wheel users group on Ravelry and asked a few questions about what I should look for in a second-hand spinning wheel. And then I talked to my husband and I said, look, I'm thinking about buying this wheel. And he's quite a mechanically minded person. And so I said, if I buy this spinning wheel, do you think you'd be able to fix it if there was anything wrong? And he seemed to think he could. But we didn't know how old it was. But that's the beauty of Ashford's, is that you can buy all the parts and restore them. So I went and had a look at it last week and it came home with me. And I'll insert some photographs. I can't show you it on the camera because currently it's in my bedroom, which is one of the darkest rooms in the house, and it's difficult to get light into that room, so I can't film it. in there at the moment, but I'll definitely insert some photographs here. And then it took me about a week to play with it and figure it all out, and I practiced spinning with just a really long piece of yarn and scrap yarn, and learnt so much. Oh my goodness, learnt so much. I think spinning wheels are one of those things that until you actually sit down and use it, it's really hard to understand. And I bought this book a little while ago off Amazon. And this book's been really helpful just to sort of label the parts and to understand how to, what the different parts do. So what slight adjustments to the tension does and what slight adjustments to the drive belt does. And I thought it was quite hilarious actually. I spent maybe 2 hours trying to get my first yarn spun with roving, and it just kept pulling out of my hands, and I couldn't do it, and I was just laughing because it was so silly. So I spent a few times sort of just walking away from it because it was one of those things that I just had to stop before I got angry. And then yesterday afternoon I sat down and just everything must have aligned because I spun a bobbin of yarn and it's blending into my scarf. Here it is. This is my very first hand spun on a spinning wheel yarn, and so this is a Corriedale that I bought from the Fibre Day at the Old Bus Depot Markets, not the one I went to a few weeks ago, but the one that was a couple of months ago. It's from Glenora Weaving, which is an Australian company, which is not very far away from Canberra. And what I plan to do is to ply it with this one here. And you can see the label down here. And so that's 50 grams and this was 50 grams. So that will be my first go at plying. And it's not too bad. I'm pretty impressed with it. It's not too thick and thin. I think the proof will come in the pudding of plying, but we'll give it a go. And the other reason I wanted to buy a spinning wheel is because not long after I got my drop spindle, I was having trouble sort of figuring out the difference between all the different wools that are available, you know, your Corriedales and your Polworths and your Merino. And people say on the internet everywhere, oh, it's hard to spin with Merino, or a beginner should start with BFL because it's got a longer staple length. And I think you actually have to sit down and try it in order to be able to really figure it out. And so I went on Etsy and I bought this braid of Polworth and silk. It's quite beautiful, as you can see. And it's got purple and silvers and aqua, and oh, I think it's just so beautiful. But of course, because it is so beautiful and because my skills with the drop spindle were not that great, I could not bring myself to spin it with the drop spindle. It was too beautiful. And so that was one of the things that was in the back of my mind. I kept thinking, I could just spin this up on my drop spindle and it would be potentially not very nice. Or I could just bite the bullet and buy myself a wheel and have a go with that. And I'm so glad that I did, because it's so much easier, it's so much faster, it's easier on my shoulders. It's just, I love it. And the other thing I wanted to see for myself is just how meditative it is to spin. And it really is. I have quite severe anxiety, and you know, all of the books and things that you read and the internet and your psychologist and everyone talks about how you should meditate because it stimulates those brain waves that allow your brain to relax. But I think that knitting and spinning does the very same thing, because you cannot think about anything else while you're spinning. Well, at least I can't. And it's such a repetitive motion, the drafting of the yarn and the foot on the pedal. And yeah, I really enjoyed the session of spinning that I had yesterday afternoon. And I know that it's just the beginning. So I'm really, really glad, happy with my purchase. I think there's a few little mods that I have to do. It's missing a spring on the brake cable, the brake cable, I think that's what it's called. So I need to go on the Ashford site and buy an Ashford maintenance kit to get that spring, and that will help control the tension. But yeah, I'm really, really happy. So don't be afraid of buying a secondhand spinning wheel if you do your research first, I think is the answer. And I like to think that my new to me wheel is one lady owner, you know, like a car, one lady owner, well cared for. So we'll see how it goes. And that roving, or that braid, here is the label, so that you can see. It's called Scottish Landscape, and it's from Fibre Artemis, and she's on Etsy, and I'll link that in the show notes. So that has been my biggest excitement this week. The reason I didn't go on an outing is and I had a planned outing. I was planning to go to Sydney on Saturday for a yarn tasting. There's an Australian yarn company called, I think they're Australian, it's spun in Australia at least, called Cleckheaton. And they have a new superfine merino, and the Knitters Guild had organised this yarn tasting with the company, and it was in Sydney, and I was going to make a day of it, catch the bus to Sydney, have a good 6 hours worth of knitting time there and back. But then my littlest boy had a high temperature on Wednesday through to Friday, and it just didn't happen. I just couldn't leave him at home with his dad and his brother in the weather that we had on the weekend, which was horrible and rainy, and so I decided not to go to Sydney, and I think that there'll be plenty of other opportunities in the future for that kind of thing. So so that's why no outing this week, but there will be an outing next episode, I promise. So the next little thing, my ponderings for the week. I've got a few ponderings this week. I didn't know whether to talk about all of them or to just save one for next time. So mistakes in knitting. It is such a good learning experience, and so I think good for your soul to make mistakes and to learn how to fix them, and to learn how to accept the mistakes. And I know that there's a lady who's written a book, Stephanie Pearl McPhee, her book, Everything I Need to Know in Life I Learned from Knitting, or something along those lines. It is just so true, because I think, you know, you could get really disheartened and give up, but why would you come so far only to throw it all aside and to give up? And I think there are some projects out there that you just go, you know what, give up, because it's just not working for me. But that's slightly different, I think, if that's the reasoning behind it. But I also think that, you know, it just teaches you that resilience to be able to just keep going, even if you have made a mistake, to either ignore it, which in some cases you can. I know that when I was making my Quaker Ridge shawlet, actually, I have made a number of mistakes in that, but because of the way that the pattern goes, I think I did an extra purl row or an extra knit row where it should have been a purl row, and I just looked at the pattern and I went, turned it over, had a look, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to add in an extra knit row next time and make it part of the pattern. And you can't even tell if you look, unless you're looking very, very closely, you cannot tell. And I think that it's a good reminder to yourself to be able to go, okay, you know what, the only person who's going to know about this mistake is me. And even, I mean, lace knitting is a little bit different, so I've discovered. It's sometimes not quite so easy to fix a mistake in lace knitting. But from my experience of now ripping back that lace knitting about half a dozen times, and the length of time that I've spent knitting on it and counting the rows, and it is frustrating, but at the same time it's almost like a challenge, because I don't want to let this silly thing to do with counting beat me. And I will be so much more proud of the end result once it's done. So yeah, it's been a really interesting learning curve knitting this lace. So I'd say that this Sunrays shawl is my very first true lace project. I did knit a hat that had some lace in it, but not the kind of lace that really matters if you mess the pattern up. So that's been a really good learning curve, I think, for me. And also, you would think that I would not be rushing out to knit my next lace project. But in fact, that the opposite is true. I am already sort of thinking, what lace project can I knit next? Because there's a part of my brain that really likes that challenge of having to count and of having to make sure that all the rows are just right. And perhaps it's the perfectionist part of my brain, maybe, I don't know. But I guess at the end of the day, I can look at it and go, you know what? That took a lot of concentration and effort, and I'm really proud of it. And I think that it's really helpful to be able to talk to yourself like that. One of the things that I do to help manage my anxiety is think about a little bit like a gratitude list, but more what I call an accomplishment list. So at the end of every day, I think about all of the things that were on my to-do list for the day, and either physically write them down and tick them off, or I will write another list of all of the things that I accomplished that day. And it might just be putting the washing out and doing the dishes, and at once upon a time in the past it was getting up and getting dressed. But when you can go back and look at all of those things that you've accomplished throughout the day, you can't help but to feel good about it, because you're focusing on all the things that you actually got done rather than all of the things that you've still got to do. And for me, that's really important, because one of the triggers for my anxiety is overwhelm. So if I feel out of control with all of the things that I have to do and overwhelmed, then I get a bit stuck and I can't keep going on anything. So for me, that's a really good strategy in order to feel better about how I'm progressing. And I think the knitting of the lace and the mistakes in the lace just help me to think about things like that, because I am focusing on how far I've, you know, all of the things that I've done that day, so how many rows I got done, rather than the number of mistakes that I'm making. So that was something that I've been pondering this week. The other thing I was going to talk about in this section was new techniques, because I have about a list, you know, a page worth of things that I would like to try in knitting. Colour work is one example. Knitting with lace, weight yarn is another example. Knitting a seamed garment is another example. And they're all quite big examples, but other examples are things like techniques. And I did try a new technique this week on those gloves. I used Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off on the top here, because one of the things that I've found in gloves that I've made in the past is that when you put them on, if there's not enough stretch here, they're not actually very comfortable to wear. So I thought once I came to the bind off on that glove that I would try this stretchy bind off to experiment, to see what it's like. And I really like it. It's not difficult. It's not that, doesn't take that much more time to do. And it's really stretchy and it's so comfortable. So Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off is excellent, and I strongly suggest it if you were looking for a way to bind off that is stretchy. And that is my question this week for all of you, is what is the technique that you would like to try next? What's on your list of things to try? My technique that I would like to try next is 2 at a time toe-up socks. And hopefully this fortnight I will start that and attempt my 2 at a time toe-up socks. I'm a bit nervous about toe-up socks because what I've read is that it's harder to get the sizing right on toe-up socks, but I can only make that judgment for myself, really. So so that will be my challenge for myself this week. I don't have lots on for the next fortnight, so hopefully I'll get at least one of my shawls finished this fortnight, and a few other things too, I hope, because I would like to start a few other things that I'm sort of holding off on starting so that I don't have too many things on the needles at one time. So thank you for watching this week. I'm really glad that you decided to join me to see what things were going on in my world this fortnight. I hope that you have an exciting couple of weeks and that you get lots of knitting done, and that it's lovely in your part of the world. Oh, actually, speaking of lovely in your part of the world, I nearly forgot that would have been terrible. I have a knit along in the Ravelry group. If anyone would like to join me in my turn of the season knit along. So the idea is that we are coming into the last month of winter here in Australia, and I am not that inspired to knit things that are dark or particularly heavy, because I know that September here in Canberra is quite cold still. It doesn't really start to warm up until the end of October. But I will, you know, I'll probably be wanting to knit less heavy things, and I've got a whole board in my Ravelry favourites of summer knitting that I want to try. So I thought, why not do a knit along where people have issues? I always have technical issues. Not enough storage on my phone. I only have a 16 gigabyte hard drive phone, and yeah, constantly have issues with storage. So yes, a knit along. So people in the Southern Hemisphere can get excited about knitting things that might be a bit lighter or a bit brighter. And people in the Northern Hemisphere can get excited about knitting things that are maybe starting to be a bit heavier in weight, or more autumn colours. And I just thought it would be fun to make that into a knit along. So hopefully there will be prizes. Currently there is a chatter thread and a finished objects thread on my Ravelry group. And hopefully if anybody has anything that they would like to donate as a prize, I would love to hear from you. And also I will be opening an Etsy shop in a few weeks, probably not till the end of August at this stage. So there'll be a project bag from me as one of the prizes, and I will be, oh, where have they gone? Oh, I'm going to give away these little stitch markers, which are the ones that I showed in the last episode. So they are one of the prizes. But if anybody else would like to donate a prize, I would love to hear from you. So please private message me on Ravelry or send me an email to let me know. So that is all for today. Definitely all for today. I have to go and pick up my son from school, and I'm reading a really gripping book at the moment. It's a Jodi Picoult novel, which name escapes me right now, but it's about an autistic child who is accused of murder. And I would like to do some reading, and I would like to do some more knitting on my sunrays shawl. So I am going to leave it off there, and it's been great to spend this time with you this afternoon, this week, and like to wish you all a happy fortnight, happy knitting, and I hope that you can craft some happiness into your life this fortnight. Bye.